standing out is more important than ever. And I think it's also why that I think focusing on things such as Spotify growth and vanity metrics such as views and likes and followers is more and more losing strategy.
You are now listening to the Creative Juice podcast brought to you by Indepreneur.io.
What's up, Indies? Welcome back to the Creative Juice podcast. This is episode 275. I'm your co-host, Jack McCarthy. With me is my co-host, Circa. What's up, dude?
What's up, man? Good to see you.
Good to see you, too. What are we getting into today?
Dude, today I really want to spend some time kind of explaining or recrafting for artists out there, especially those who are in the most painful part of their music career journey, where they're just starting out or they've yet to really get significant traction, kind of what the marketing landscape from a few marketing pros, if I don't say so myself, from what we experience as like kind of our go-to strategies. Over the years, Indepreneur, we've had a lot of different strategies that have worked better or worse at different times. So I'd love to just give a refresher course on the current like new artist playbook or relatively new artist playbook for growing your fan base and getting to a place where this thing really has momentum.
I love it. Yeah, I think that's a really important topic right now. I think it's always good to give these kind of refreshers too, because the marketing landscape is always changing. Trends are always changing. What's working, what we use at the agency and in IndieFounder, our coaching program, I think really help to inform at the very, very front lines what we're seeing is working and what's not, and what might be tiring out a little bit. I definitely have some strong opinions about this topic, so let's get into it.
Yeah, let's do that. So the first thing I want to kind of say is that probably for a good 5 years there, from when we started in 2017 to about 2021, maybe 2020 even, might be that short, the main strategy was to use video content to gain a fan base using social advertising. So you have some good video content, could be a full music video, it could be a performance video, it could be a short form reel, whatever. And your goal is to distribute that to a targeted audience as often as possible, at as much scale as possible. And the key being that there's no offer, no click, no button, no link. You're just showing them this piece of content because it was very difficult to get people to click over and take an action on whatever the next page was. And so since it was so difficult and we saw conversion rates be so low, we just decided, let's not fight it. Let's use that native platform advertising to just show them content on the platform. We get cheaper ad costs that way. We get higher watch throughs, better optimized targeting, meaning once the ad figured out who was responding best, it would snap to just that audience and it would usually have better performance over time. Nowadays, we are doing a lot less advertising that doesn't have a call to action, that doesn't have a link, that doesn't have a button. I think, if you just go by what we practice and maybe not what you presume that we preach based on what we've done in the past, you would see that we're going almost, in a lot of cases for newer artists, we're going for sales if we can. And that's a big shift from when we first started out, I would say.
For sure, yeah. I think this is a particularly interesting one because I think a lot of it I think the shift started to occur with some of the viral sort of use that we saw of vertical video platforms like TikTok and Instagram Reels, where a lot of traffic was being directed organically out to Spotify, out to Apple Music, out to, bridge pages or link trees. And we started to see a shift towards running ad campaigns with a call to action over to those platforms. I think this is where some of that shift from purely native advertising with no call to action over to softer calls to action, or at least the ability for, a viewer to go somewhere. I think that's where it started to occur, was can we test this and does it have legs? And we found that it did. Actually, it was probably about maybe a year and a half ago or two, it might even be 2 years now, where we started experimenting with this. And Ed and I did an episode talking about what we were experimenting with Instagram Reels, when Reels was just starting to come out and just being a new platform that we could advertise with. And what we started seeing with that and the ability to get, viral traction from that was totally new at the time. It was different from what people were doing with Instagram stories. It was different from what we were doing with native advertising, with long form video, without calls to action. And I definitely think since then, that has been a primary driver of new audience growth, has been, like you said, ads with some kind of call to action on them.
Yeah. So I think it's important to kind of cover why that is. Like, before, we could eke out distinct performance benefits that outweighed the cost of not having any call to action. Number one, it was really easy to retarget people based on watching videos. So you could create audiences of people who had actually watched the video in your first ad and then send them another ad. And it would only show to those people who watched it. And so if we didn't get the click in the first interaction, instead of kind of ruining the experience with a button that made it seem more like an ad, we could just retarget them. Very inexpensive, and they were a highly qualified audience. So we paid very little for the ads because it wasn't harming the user experience. And so it was a great strategy, but that kind of eroded, right? With iOS 14, we had damage to retargeting, damage to ad optimization. So actually getting cheaper ad costs on that first ad kind of eroded. And then we just saw people getting a lot more used to e-commerce and buying things online and doing things online.
Dude, that was a COVID phenomenon, I think.
100%.
It sped up the landscape a lot.
I would 100% agree. And so nowadays, if we have an artist in front of us who might not have that large of a fan base, but like has a video or two and has an album out, especially 2 or 3 records, or even if they had enough to make 2 or 3 EPs, like they had enough songs, whatever we need to get 2 or 3, albums we can sell, or, album plus some merch, are kind of a lot of the go-to things that we're doing in the agency and more importantly in the coaching program, is getting them set up with what we call a free plus shipping and handling funnel, where in the ad platform, what we're offering to people, we're showing them a piece of content, just like with our old fan finder method that we did for so many years, catching their eye, catching their attention, ensuring that they like it, right, as a major component. But then in the copy and in the link that they can click to go to next, the offer there is, hey, I will give you one of my records, typically a CD, but it could be cassette or vinyl, like crazier things have happened. And I'll give it to you for free. All you have to do is pay for the shipping and handling for it to come to your house. So it's a pretty fair trade-off. It enacts reciprocity, which is if someone gives you something, you will feel indebted to them. You'll be more likely to do something for them in return. And it gets someone beyond this sort of customer barrier, where the hardest thing to do is to get someone to enter their credit card information into your website for the first time. It's like the biggest chasm to cross. Once they do cross it, though, you've sort of knocked down that wall and a lot more can happen on the other side. So they're pulling out the credit card to pay for shipping and handling. And then everything else you have to offer them happens after that information is entered, such that they might have come there for a free CD, but if they want, they can add another album or a piece of merch to that. And some people will only take the free CD, and you'll probably eat a little bit of cost on that. But enough people will take those subsequent follow-up offers that occur immediately after they take the first one, it's a one-click upgrade, that it will pay for the cost of not only advertising to all of those people to find the 1% to 5% who actually want to take the offer, but also of the people who don't buy the upgrades. So it'll pay for all that in an ideal scenario. Some cases we're seeing the return on ad spend. So most of the costs, we're getting a 2x multiple on that or a 4x multiple on that. So these artists are exposing themselves to thousands and thousands of new audience members every day who are watching their content, and then they are getting money in some cases in return. They're getting profit. or at the very worst, they're liquidating their ad costs. So all the costs to expose themselves to all those audience members is they don't pay a dime. And the difference with that is that if you run an ad with a video like our fan finder method, you're limited to your budget, right? But if you get a successful free plus shipping and handling funnel running, you're limited to your profitability. You can scale it up and scale it up. You could end up spending, $10,000 a day, even though you could never spend that out of pocket. And that's kind of why I think it's become the more powerful method and why it's like kind of like the go-to now.
Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it is. I will say, and this is where some of my harder opinions about this come into play from my experiences, there are definitely some qualifiers to using this strategy at that level, to especially to cold audiences. And this is going to be some hard truth, I think, to a lot of artists. But like, if you're not that good, or you have content that just sucks, and it's hard to step back objectively and decide that.
No one's going to step back objectively and decide that.
That's why I said, you're not going to like what I have to say here.
It's too painful.
Yeah, you're not going to like what I have to say here. But this isn't a strategy that works for everyone across the board. If you're early stages and still developing your product, meaning your music, your brand, who you are as an artist, what you sound like, your recorded product, this strategy is probably not going to work for you. If you don't have a back end of products that you can sell and sell well and then continue to monetize that fan base, it's going to be an uphill battle just as much as it is going to be trying to grow a fan base just advertising your music as a starting point. And I think that that's a helpful consideration to make here into why, video advertising as a whole, even without a monetization element involved at the very top of the funnel, is still really important to what we're talking about today, is because just because you're still in developmental mode doesn't mean you can't grow. It might just mean that you can't monetize right away, or you can't liquidate the costs.
I'd love to clarify that, like, we're talking about people who have either an agency behind them or someone who is trusted at the highest level of that agency coaching them. So they've got training wheels, they've got bumpers, and that's important to realize. In our training, the free plus shipping and handling funnel training in our Indie Pro membership, we don't even talk about running free plus shipping and handling funnel to a cold audience until like the last module. And all the initial modules are about doing it with a existing warm audience, because there's just so many things you could screw up. And in order to make it work with a cold audience, you need to be running like a minimum of like $50 a day to even like hope to see a positive return on ad spend.
Yeah, I mean, the bare minimum I usually run them at is 30, and that's like the bare minimum of like...
It's like, yeah, like you might be cutting into whether or not this will work at that budget.
Yeah, that's testing of like, all right, let's run this for a few days and see if it gets any bites, and then it's like, all right, we got to get it up, or it's not gonna continue.
Yeah, it's an expensive thing to have to pay again and again to find out like you don't have the right concoction. So you might might not have great ad creative. You might not have the best sales experience when people click over. You might not have a great product. People might not like your face. And there's a lot of different things that can go wrong. And if you're paying $150 a pop to go through a testing phase, you quickly run out of money. So yeah, like it's definitely not a strategy for everybody, but in an instance where we've got someone who can't do too much wrong because they've got an expert guiding them and they've got good music and they've got good material, there's just fan base is not that large. I'd much rather put you on a program where you're going to grow with more exposure per day because you're not limited by budget, and you might make some money. Right now, a person who works on our team, Dukes, is running free push shipping and handling funnel for himself. All of his audience was gained in promotional cycles that happened years ago. So they're a little bit cold, and it hasn't been growing for years. And, his main method of growth now is this strategy. And, obviously there's a lot of caveats, there's a lot of qualifiers. But in an instance where a new artist is right for this, I would much rather them do that than Fan Finder. Whereas in previous years, I would much rather them do Fan Finder than anything else, because my presumption is you're not going to get enough sales to subsidize the cost of your advertising. Whereas now you could.
Yeah, it's true. I think that was a helpful explainer from both of us on like the qualifiers and the bumpers, the training wheels of this, because it's an important consideration to make. I would hate to go on record and just say blanket like
Yeah.
go do this if you
Yeah.
want to explode your fan base, because it's
No.
just
Yeah.
that's
No.
not it. That's not it.
Not only that, but you have to be skilled at advertising, e-commerce, and email marketing in order to really make it sing.
Yeah, for sure.
So that's why like I wouldn't blindly tell someone to attempt it without like the help of an expert, but it is hard to ignore how preferable it is as a method of growth to anything else given those things. Because not only are you getting that exposure, not only are you potentially getting that profit, but you're getting email subscribers and customers at the same time. In fact, every email subscriber you get is a customer. And customers are on average about, I don't know what the number is today, but at one time it was 5 times more likely to buy a product than a non-customer. So you have a 5x higher chance of selling them something again in the future than someone who just joined your email list because they really like you, but they haven't bought anything yet. So it's like, you could quickly grow up to a scale where you can start looking at this as a side income that's significant and doesn't require like a whole lot of luck-based things.
Right. Yeah. I want to dig in a little bit further on something we mentioned about the development of your content and your creative. And this can apply to any kind of advertising that you're running for fan base growth. But this was a big piece of what I was thinking of when we started discussing this topic and talking about bringing it to the show. I was having a conversation the other day, actually, with Jonah, with Dukes, about some of the IndieX clients that he works with and the IndieFounder students that he works with, in particular about top of funnel growth with Fan Finder and with Instagram Reels and Instagram Stories, vertical video. And he was mentioning something that I've heard come up a number of times in I want to say the last 2 quarters, is that the video content, the ads just aren't performing like they used to. He actually had a call with a prospective IndieFounder client who was like, yeah, like I took the Fan Finder training back in 2017 and it was amazing and it was working so well at getting new fans for us. And now it just doesn't seem to be working the same way that it was. And I want to address this kind of here as the core of why advertising and any of these strategies that we're talking about will or won't work for you if you're trying to grow from the ground up. And that's, again, I'm coming here with hard opinions and something that no one wants to hear, myself included, is that a lot of the stuff that audiences are seeing online is becoming tired. And you might have been able to get away with running your music video as a video ad campaign using some of the strategies that we talked about, maybe writing the headline copy the way that we suggested in the training, taking tips from the show here on how we talk about copywriting and how to get people's attention. Maybe you could get away with using a suboptimal creative 2 years ago, 3 years ago. We're not there anymore. In fact, we're in a place where now audiences are so used to seeing really great. I think, honestly, artists have leveled up so much to the point where, like, there's a lot of really great content out there that you have to stand out more. Like, you need to make stuff that's more on spec and really be thinking outside of the box of the recommendation that we make and building something that's great for you more now than ever if you want to stand out.
Yeah, I would add on to that like at least half of if you're marketing to a young audience of music fans, at least half of them are content creators now.
Dude, that's such a good point.
Everyone's made a music video, dude. They're ubiquitous at this point. Performance videos too. Like so much of the population, I would attribute this to the accelerating curve of technology, where like technology has brought extreme abundance. And the average person can literally afford to like make videos and put them on social media with a majority of their time. And a lot of people do. And the hard fact is that like there's nothing novel anymore about being an artist or creating content around your art. It is as common as like a glass of water. It's everywhere. And so those are some things you have to come up against. Everyone's got a Spotify. Everyone's got a new track. Everyone's got a cool performance video. It's very common nowadays. So yeah, like standing out is more important than ever. And I think it's also why that I think focusing on things such as Spotify growth and vanity metrics such as views and likes and followers is more and more losing strategy. Why focusing on revenue as early as possible, something we would never have recommended in 2017. You know, we have this whole buddy system marketing framework that's based on the idea that like before you should ask someone to marry you, you should go on some dates, right? That's like key to a lot of marketing. But it just is the case that like you could spend all your time buttering up 1,000 people, or you could waste zero time finding out which among those 1,000, which 5 among those 1,000 want to get married right now. And whereas before I would clear cut say, butter up the 1,000, you never know. I think nowadays I'm coming around to like, it really depends. Like there are a lot of cases in which kind of looking for the low hanging fruit that exists out there is a better strategy.
If you think about like the pyramid of customers for a business, you have like the 3% at the top of the pyramid for any given business that's ready to buy from you, right? All they have to be is, for businesses that solve problems, they have to be problem aware and then made aware of your solution, and then they're going to buy it so long as they're convinced that it's valuable. The same kind of idea applies here, is like you're going after that low-hanging fruit at the very top of the funnel early on. And then, you know, you've got the world to play with after that. You can go after all the people that you are going to have to butter up.
And ideally a bit more budget at that point.
Right.
So yeah, I think that's so true, is that like, make no mistake, when we started, there wasn't really this low-hanging fruit. We tried lots of direct-to-sales strategies in the early days that just didn't really work with a cold audience. But we're in a place, in an environment now where you can, as an artist, you can offer sales to cold audiences. And as long as all these other things we talked about are correct, you're coming correct with all those, you know, you're not going to see the highest conversion rates. You're not going to see 40% of the people you expose this ad to, or even 40% of the people who click, or even 40% of the people who add it to their cart actually checking out. But that's not really the goal. The goal is to get those 5% or even 1% in some cases, and make mathematical sense for yourself. Because once you're doing that, let's say, you know, you're able to, out of 1,000 people, find 10 customers. Okay. And let's say that, you know, in the next 1,000, you're able to make those 10 customers worth enough to pay for showing it to all those 1,000 people. Well, there's not 2,000 people out there to test from. There's millions. So once you dial it in, you can scale up and spend for a long time before you run into problems of, I'm not buttering them up enough. I'm not creating a relationship enough. I think that's really where the environment has come around to, where, you know, the public is out there consuming media, a lot of which they now freely pay for. And we were coming out of 2017 in an era where like streaming was just barely more convenient than stealing everything.
Oh, how we long for those days.
Yeah. It's really changed up a lot. So yeah, I would say like the new artist playbook, I would say if you don't have something to sell, figure that out quicker than ever before. You know, Andy Hunter, one of our lead strategists at the agency, went right for the throat selling tickets to live shows for a band you've never heard of, and was wildly successful with that strategy and free push shipping and handling funnels, you know, all the way up 2018, 2019, 2020 today. He's always gone straight for the throat, always gone for cold sales in one way or another, and it's worked out for him. And it's not something that, you know, we're ready to ignore. I think, you know, finding ways to make it safer for indie artists out there to go for cold sales, and also making it easier for them to develop product early on as opposed to later, and spending years in development of, you know, a warm audience. I would say like if you can get that warm audience by selling things, that's going to be a whole lot faster.
Yeah, you know, it's really interesting. It was something I think we started to see. It was kind of peeking its head out from under the horizon probably even as far back as early 2020. I can point us to a podcast episode that you and I did back in 2020, an IndieX case study about an artist that really had no name recognition apart from the artist that he was working with on a project. And we onboarded and did straight cold sale. Now, this wasn't free plus shipping and handling. We were selling full price product.
Full price vinyls, which are not cheap.
Full price vinyl, yeah. And that was one of the first times that we saw that we were able to do that with a relatively unknown artist that
Not relatively, completely unknown.
a completely unknown artist.
Yeah, no one had ever heard of this guy.
Yeah, all that they had was name recognition attached through adjacent artists that they were working with. And that was a pretty eye-opening moment for us. I'll link to that episode in the show notes. It's a good one. I think that was before I was co-hosting this show too, or right around the turn, which is fun. Should go back and listen to that one. That was one of the earliest moments, I think, where we kind of scratched our heads and said, huh. And then there were a few artists that came on board at IndieX who we started testing this cold free plus shipping and handling strategy with. Also, cold opt-in strategy with a tripwire on the back end was also another one that we found. There was a country artist that we were working with actually too. This is probably another useful point to talk about here, is that if you have been developing a warm audience and maybe you've got like an album launch experience or something that you've kind of exhausted your warm audience that you've been sending it to, another audience growth play that we've used over the last few years is pivoting that opt-in campaign to cold traffic, put a tripwire on the back end, meaning on the confirmation page, a sales tripwire.
Tripwire is a product price ideally below $20, just to translate for the folks at home.
Yeah, a low price product. A lot of times we were running them as free plus shipping and handling offers on this back end, and using that to subsidize the acquisition cost of these email subscribers worked a treat. This was, again, one of those turning points, sort of opening moments. And it was with one of these country artists that we were working with where we really saw it start to work. And it was like, oh man, this is great. That's another one from the playbook that's definitely good to consider as well. Allows you to position a different type of offer to that cold traffic that's not saying, here's a free CD. It can be, here's a free content experience, and then there might be something else on the back end that you're selling. That's another one that we use a lot of.
The power of a break-even funnel is not to be understated, and perhaps something we might have overlooked a little too much is just like, if you can endear people to you with advertising and marketing, but it costs you $300 a month, but it works a little bit better than if you tried to sell them something. That might be overpowered by the fact that if you have a break-even funnel where some of those people do buy something, you can scale it up. So you can go from the same amount of people as that sort of $300 a month budget strategy to 10x that in not a whole lot of time if it's working appropriately. So I think that whereas before, like in our experiments, we found that like there are some key differences between marketing an artist and marketing like a brand new e-commerce brand with a product. I think a lot of those differences have begun to erode, or it's not so clear that it is that different. And I was going back through the training stack that we have in Indie Pro with Jesse and just sort of looking at it like, if we were to rearrange this for what is best praxis right now in IndieFounder and IndieX, what would it look like? The only things we would put before those more sales-focused strategies like free plus shipping and handling are prerequisites to it. Make merch that fans want is a training that is particularly relevant. It's like making products. Be your own videographer. Being able to quickly spin up video content that's compelling and eye-catching and cool. And how to build your brand, which is how to actually put together a visual brand that you can present to people. In the last episode, we went over like, don't get too stuck in branding, but like having something presentable and consistent. People don't feel like they're interacting with a completely different artist every time they go to a different page. That's helpful. And once you have those things in place, a lot of my worries about you selling, not all of them, definitely not all of them, but a fair amount of them are put to bed. And then after that, like it's a whole lot of e-commerce, like plumbing and email marketing plumbing and ad skills that you would need to pull that off. Point being is that if you can pull it off, it's an optimal way to grow.
You definitely learn really fast too. Like it is truly trial by fire, that it's like, if you put these things in place and you start running ads and you're not seeing traction, either one of the skills is lacking or the product isn't that good.
You're also motivated to figure it out really quickly.
Yeah. Either way, you're learning. And like, yes, is that challenging and potentially like throwing rocks at your ego a little bit? Yeah, but that's business, man. Like, coming from a world of marketing businesses, you know, the restaurant down the street from you, they're not trying to just get people aware of them for the first time. They're trying to get people to come in and eat.
Yeah. And maybe that's like sort of a key differentiator. I got a friend, man, who has 1 million monthly listeners, over 1 million, like 1.3 million monthly listeners. His only revenue comes from a Spotify check. And if you were doing any of the things we practice at IndieX, he'd be like making 100 grand like every quarter or some shit like that. Like,
You should come talk to us.
yeah, he should. But like, just to say that it took him everything to build that audience, a lot of luck as well, and a lot of hard work across a decade. And it's great that he is able to afford his entire lifestyle from that Spotify check. That's awesome. But he probably could have been able to afford that lifestyle directly through music only a lot earlier. And he probably could be making a lot more by now if he had some sales in place. And he's afraid to sell stuff. And a lot of artists are. They're really bad at it. They're like worried that they're going to like spook the gods or something, or that's not hip. But I think that like artists who are able to sell early and learn how to sell to strangers are going to outperform quicker going forward. I think it's a major trend.
I actually think it's a skill that is harder to tap into after you've grown too.
Yeah.
Because all of a sudden there is and it shouldn't be, because if you've truly captured an audience that, you know, knows, likes, and trusts you in like marketing speak, right? It should be easier for them to sell. It shouldn't be such a psychological hurdle for you to get over. But when there's a lot of them, it's like, oh man, am I going to expose the masses of people that like me to something that maybe they don't like? I can sort of see how that's hard to get yourself over, as opposed to if there's not a lot of people, it's like, well, if I shoot for it and I shoot my shot and it doesn't work out, well, screw it. Like, I'll try again later and it'll be better.
But from a math perspective, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. Like when artists come to us with a warm audience and they're like, we don't know how to sell stuff, it's like, okay, this is going to be easy.
Yeah, definitely.
But from a psychological perspective, it's like 100 times harder.
It's two warring ideals going on, because from an agency level, like I can't tell you how many artists we've talked to where it's been like trying to, you know, pull teeth to get them to just to start. Just to share a funny story, like we have so many artists who work with us at the agency that have large fan bases where we'll get 2.5 or 3 months into our engagement together and we're dragging them kicking and screaming to launch mode. And it's like, come on, if we just hit the red button, you're going to start making money. Whereas we have artists who come on board who, you know, maybe they've got some investment behind them where they can afford some growth in the beginning, and they're not necessarily going to make the money back from working with us right away. But they're ready to go in week 1 and they're excited and they're not afraid to do it. The psychological difference between the two is stark to me.
Yeah. There's a gentleman on Wendy Day's podcast. I'm blanking on his Instagram handle right now, but he rocks. And a year ago, I saw him saying something like, you'll sell $130 hoodies way faster than you'll get the 1 million streams it takes to make $3K on Spotify.
Oh,
and I was like, 100%. 100%.
Yeah, I think I saw that clip.
Such a good point. But it's like, yeah, like getting good at selling early on. And like, who's the darling of the hip hop, you know, industry right now? The biggest up and comer, La Russell, that everyone's talking about. And then before him, Russ. These are people who knew how to sell early on. And they tried to as the second they could. So I think that fan subsidized growth is kind of more the name of the game today than when we first started.
Just to put a definition around that, Cirque, how would you define fan subsidized growth or fan financed acquisition?
So if you get in front of someone there should be a way for them to buy something from you without breaking the chain. You don't have to get back in front of them. If they click the right buttons and they do the right things, they should be able to buy something from you. So if you're getting in front of someone, there should be a pathway for them to an offer, typically a unique offer, something that they can't resist. If they dig the music, this offer should be compelling to them. So at the moment they're checking out your music, there is technically a way that they might end up giving you money. Okay? And if you get 100 fans, you shouldn't have 0 customers. You should have 1 to 10. Okay. And as opposed to like back in 2017, we built up 10,000 fans without getting 1 customer yet. Or they were, customers were incidental. Like they went through the trouble of finding your store, but that wasn't presented to them. Basically, anytime you're getting in front of people, there should be a pathway to a sale. Not many of them won't take it. And it shouldn't be the only experience they can get out of it, right? It should be its own standalone experience. Even if they don't buy anything, it's a great touch, as we talk about in marketing. You had an interaction with them and it was positive. But those who are really enamored with that interaction, who really enjoyed it, they can give you money in return for value. That's how I think of it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, no, I think that's a great definition and a good way to kind of explain it in a way that makes sense. Circling back real quick, man, we've really gotten kind of deep into selling psychology a bit here, which is good. I love this. Think about if any of this troubles you, right? When you think about growing a fan base online, I'd like to encourage you to think about when you started playing shows for the first time. If you are someone who plays shows, how long did it take you to want to have merch available at those shows? Hopefully not too long, right? I feel like most of the bands that I've been in, it was like a handful of shows, and then it was like, well, we at least need to have t-shirts to sell, Think about that.
Yeah. Also, there might be a great many people watching, we run a company that teaches independent artists how to sell stuff for the most part. And you can imagine that we've run into all manner of people where their objection to what we're saying is like, oh, what do we just become corporate prostitutes at this point? Like, they're very anti-capitalist.
Yes.
Yeah. And they just think that we're telling them to become shills for Amway or some shit like that. And it's like, dude, fine. Fine. Like, if that's you, we're probably not your cup of tea. That's totally cool. From where I'm standing, there are no non-profit structures for you as an artist. They don't exist. And so the assumption is that you're going to have to make money. And what I'm kind of presenting to you here is that it's better that happens sooner than later. And that's going to take you getting good at things you're not used to being good at yet. And, the kind of tire analogy there is you weren't always good at making music. You wanted to do that. And so you got good at some things like a DAW or an instrument or singing or writing lyrics. And now you want to make that music your full-time job, AKA a business. And so you're going to have to get good at some things you weren't good at before. And your instrument is going to be sales and marketing. I make this argument in a upcoming live training we're going to be doing, but the number one skill for an entrepreneur to have besides being an entrepreneur is sales and marketing. That's it. Otherwise you're going to have to hire it out and you're probably going to fail. I see a lot more entrepreneurs who are talented marketers and salespeople succeeding than I do who just hired it out or found someone to do it. It's typically a foundational skill of the business. So just kind of a stump speech out there for artists who might be I don't want to do all this stuff. It's dude, I don't want to do all this stuff either. I'd rather play video games. But the constraints of my other wants make it such that I should do this stuff. And when you start doing it, it's actually pretty enjoyable.
For sure. I think this is especially true, speaking of hiring it out. I can't tell you how many, just in the last 2 weeks, how many clients at IndieX we've talked to or we've been doing audits for them and have found the scary inconsistent spikes in their Spotify streams that represent them hiring out to a playlisting company. And then we have to have the heartbreaking conversation to be hey, look, we're your agency now. we see where you're paying these people. It's probably not what you think it is.
Yeah.
Maybe don't do that anymore.
You know how your fans also like is all people that don't seem real? They're not real.
Yeah. To close off this episode with strategies that don't work to grow an audience.
Yeah, but like, just say that, like, if you're an artist, you're sitting here, you don't have that large a fan base, you don't know how you're going to get one. I find the likelihood of you making 5-figure revenues as an artist from direct selling to be 100x that of you making 5-figure revenues from a streaming check. Just is insanely more likely. If you just go for the thing you want, you're more likely to get it. So I think the big shift in our philosophy that we're really starting to explore and see ways that we can, restructure our messaging, restructure our advice stack to really reflect is that, like, the quicker we can get you to making some offers, the better. Don't wait around. Don't waste time. That is going to require enough music that you can actually, like, sell it. It's going to require the wherewithal to create products, and that doesn't come instantly. It might not even come in your first year as an artist, but once it's in place, no time should be wasted.
I couldn't say it better myself. It's great. I hope you guys dig this. This is kind of a mind dump from me and Cirque, things that we've been thinking about for a little while now.
Yeah.
So I hope you guys dig it. I'm sure we'll have more to talk about on this topic in future episodes and inside of Indie Pro. So if you're not in there, make sure you join us inside the community. We'll drop a link in the show notes. Join us in Indie Pro. We'll catch you guys next time on Creative Juice. Peace.
Peace.
Can y'all really feel us? East Coast, feel us, West Coast, feel me.